Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Thinktank.
Welcome to a new episode of Mena Talks. My name is Jasmin Arémi. I am an editor at Mena-Watch, and my distinguished guest today is Ms. Paushali Lass. Mrs. Lass is an Israel strategy, culture and diplomacy advisor, a true bridge builder between cultures. What that entails for both Israel and Kurdistan, you will discover in our conversation today. It is truly wonderful to have you with us, Mrs. Lass.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
You mentioned that it's usually only Kurds themselves who talk about Rojava. Why do you believe it is so crucial for non-Kurds to extensively discuss this particular subject?
Yes, that's a very good question. I truly believe that non-Kurds should also speak publicly about Rojava, because compassion truly isn't a matter of one's origin. I feel for the Kurds, first and foremost, as a human being. I am a woman, and one doesn't have to be part of a specific people or nation to recognize suffering and truly take it seriously. And the Kurds are profoundly connected to their ancestral land, yet they have been without their own sovereign state for an extended period. This is precisely what makes them vulnerable, and they are persecuted and killed. It's not because of what they do, but because of their very being and who they truly are. And that is crucially important to know. I am also very familiar with this from my understanding of Jewish history. Jews too were and still are attacked simply because of their identity. And from history, we also know that violence stemming from ideology, such as today's Islamism and this extremism, doesn't stop with just one group. Those who attack the Kurds today and manage to get away with it will undoubtedly attack others tomorrow. That's precisely why groups like ISIS or Daesh have extensively spread, reaching well beyond just one specific region. And that's precisely why it's crucial for outsiders like myself, those who are not Kurdish, to step up and make their voices heard and for us to raise awareness. And the more individuals who actually look out, pay attention, and speak up about this matter, the greater the pressure on governments and indeed on world powers to act in a similar fashion. And lastly, I always try my best to treat others with the same respect and consideration that I would hope to receive myself. If I were to find myself feeling all alone, abandoned, or even forgotten, then any kind of support from others would genuinely mean an awful lot to me. And that is precisely what I'm doing for the Kurds to effectively demonstrate my unwavering solidarity. And that's precisely what I want for many more people, indeed for a lot of people to follow suit.
So, what personal experiences and encounters have precisely shaped your interest in the Kurdish question?
Well, my interest in the Kurdish question stems from both my belief in the Tanakh, that is the Hebrew Bible, and from personal encounters and experiences. I'm thinking about our forefather Abraham, specifically where he originated from, and the very place where he resided. I find this whole region very fascinating, And I find that this area, precisely this area, is where the Kurds currently reside, or indeed have been living for many years now. And Abraham also lived in coexistence with other people of different faiths, upholding values such as dignity and respect, fostering a sense of community and shared living. And I see that in the Kurds as well. So, yes, exactly. And in Europe, I have also repeatedly encountered Kurds and experienced them as truly very polite, respectful, and open-minded people. And yes, and these impressions deepened significantly when, in the course of my work concerning Israel, I also had the opportunity to meet and get to know Kurds. And, for example, a person, someone who has, in the meantime, actually become a very good friend of mine as well. Through this, I saw how openly and naturally many Kurds support Israel, and that deeply touched me. And then, in early 2023, following the massive earthquake in Turkey, I found myself in northeastern Turkey, collaborating with an Israeli aid organization. And it was only then and there that it truly dawned on me that we were indeed in a region where a significant number of Kurds reside. I witnessed how they face discrimination within Turkish society and are frequently depicted in a negative light by state-controlled media outlets. And at the same time, I also experienced the Kurds there as being extraordinarily helpful and incredibly hospitable. And after the 7th of October, I also experienced how many Kurds in Europe, despite massive threats and intimidations, openly stand with Israel. That truly left a decompression on me, I must honestly admit. And it became clear to me that I wanted to connect these people more strongly with Israel. Last year, specifically last November, for instance, I actually connected a Kurdish delegation with the Israeli parliament. And precisely that was indeed a profoundly special moment for me personally. And the manner in which the Kurds defend Israel represents a profound form of solidarity, a connection I have seldom witnessed within any other community. This connection is founded on a deep love for the land, not a desire for dominance, but rather in a firm belief in dignity, respect, and a genuine coexistence. Yes.
To what extent does your own personal background shape? You mentioned earlier that you're German with Indian roots. Your perspective on the matter of stateless peoples, and also the questions of self-determination, which is always so prominently at the forefront for the Kurds?
Having been born and raised in India, I must admit I was fortunate to grow up in a country that had gained its independence. Moreover, I also hold German citizenship. That means I also live in a free country and in a country where my children can also live freely and safely and can be friends with anyone. Be friends with, everyone, and be able to live in safety. Growing up in a democracy is truly a great privilege. However, these rights are not something I take for granted as a matter of course. Those with privilege absolutely must actively use their advantages to advocate for and support others who are less fortunate. And every human being, I believe, should inherently possess the right to live in absolute safety. Girls, in particular, should have the complete freedom to choose their own life's path without the constant fear of violence or forced choices dictating their way. But I also know that India, through this British colonialism, India also has a colonial history, doesn't it? And that's precisely why I understand what it truly means to live under the rule of such a foreign power. Colonial powers draw their borders, as we also observe in the Middle East, making decisions over land and power, which results in displacement, conflict, and suffering. We also had that experience in India. And unfortunately, something very similar is happening to the Kurds even today. That's why I'm speaking. So, yeah, my background definitely has an influence over my commitment, right?
Considering the current situation in Rojava, specifically northeastern Syria, how would you describe the recent events that have unfolded over the past few days?
The situation in Rojava is truly dramatic. I get hundreds of messages every day, and that's no exaggeration, Hundreds of messages from the region. From people who are crying out for help, people who are truly desperate, that they are truly in such a desperate state. And I also witness videos from people who've lost their family members or exactly, civilians are being kidnapped, women are being raped, and people are starving. Many are perishing due to the incredibly frigid temperatures and the severe lack of essential medical provisions. We also see photos and videos of children who are dying simply because they are Kurds. It is absolutely dramatic. And then electricity and fuel and just this basic infrastructure is being cut off, and only very limited aid is getting into the region. And the Turkish attacks are worsening this emergency even further. And the self-administration, which for years has tried to build stability, education, and women's rights, is being directly destroyed. And as of today, the Kurdish people are living in constant fear, with the humanitarian catastrophe threatening to escalate even further. So if we don't soon have a genuine, proper ceasefire, then the situation will undoubtedly continue to escalate further. And I must also address Turkey's role in northern Syria. Yes, I really must address this point as well, because Ankara not only completely rejects Kurdish autonomy, but it also actively supports various Islamist groups. Regarding Hamas, we know that Hamas operatives find a safe haven within Turkey. Many are also getting Turkish passports. They have Turkish passports, and they also conduct fundraising and operational planning. Coming from inside Turkey, and Turkish politics is ideologically driven and not at all defensive in nature. And Turkey has been destabilizing the entire region for years now with military attacks against the Kurds, and it hasn't just been since January, naturally. They're also carrying out drone strikes and providing support to Islamist proxies, such as, for instance, the Syrian army right now. And I also have to mention this information policy, what's in the media, the state-of-the-art Turkish media. They constantly speak ill of the Kurds and talk about Kurds as terrorists. Then they also delegitimize Israel, of course, and present all democratic pluralistic societies as enemies. And this narrative, it very much resembles the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, or the Muslim community. Is also carried into Europe through diaspora networks, and yes, it promotes radicalization, especially among young people.
Medially, this topic really doesn't receive quite as much international attention as it ought to, There are only a few German-language newspapers that genuinely report much on this topic, or when they do, it's often quite oversimplified.
No.
Where would you say the biggest shortcomings are?
Well, naturally, we observe that whenever Trump undertakes any action, it immediately seizes media attention. It deeply troubles me that there is more discussion surrounding Greenland than about innocent civilians who are perishing, who are being trafficked as sex slaves and other horrific acts. And when ISIS terrorists are released from prison, that should truly terrify everyone in Europe, especially for me as a European citizen residing in Germany. That really ought to frighten me more than whatever Trump is up to in Greenland. So, I'm not going to say now whether what Trump is doing is right or wrong. That's not the point. But when it's about life itself, when it concerns real lives where people are actually dying and, there's hardly any media coverage to be found.
Yes, exactly.
And of course, in addition to that, I must also say what is happening in Iran. A really terrible situation in Iran. Nobody really talks about that either. So, in my opinion, it doesn't get enough attention in our media. However, Iran is perhaps an even bigger topic, and for this reason, when someone speaks about the Middle East, Iran comes first, and then Rojava.
Perhaps that's a good moment to briefly consider this from a historical standpoint as well. Unfortunately, geopolitically, the Kurds have sadly been the real losers for a very long time already. What role, if any, does the West play in all of this? What exactly is the background here?
So the Kurds are an ancient indigenous people inhabiting this specific region for a very long time, and they have resided for many centuries within this entire region, which we now refer to. So they are currently distributed throughout the modern states of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. They're simply dispersed, and somehow they were consistently entangled in these frontline conflicts because, as I previously mentioned, the colonial Western powers, they perpetually delineate the borders, you see? We have witnessed that throughout history. And I must also say that in the ancient world, there were no national or nation states like we have today, but rather groups of people and various kingdoms. And the Kurds had local dominions, but they hadn't had a formal recognized state for a very long time now. And after World War I, the Treaty of Sèvres, signed in 1920 in Sèvres, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, did at first envision the possibility of a Kurdish state. However, in 1923, with the re-establishment of Turkish authority, the Treaty of Lausanne effectively put an end to the hopes and promises that had been so generously outlined in the Treaty of Sèvres. The borders of today's nations were drawn up without the Kurds' input, which is why they find themselves divided among those 4 different countries. And Western powers played a pivotal role in that period. Countries like Great Britain, France, the USA, and others initially supported the Kurds, but they failed to uphold their promises, and they consistently prioritized their own strategic interests above all else. Wouldn't you agree? And today, that dynamic is repeating itself. The Kurds, in many ways, are once again dependent on Western powers, be it the USA or the EU. Their self-governance, their security, and their future are often decided over. Not, without their permission, definitely, while geopolitical interests always take precedence, don't they? So we observe the actions or inactions of the USA, and it seems the Kurds are perpetually caught in the crossfire. So I believe that despite their deep historical roots in this region and their own striving for autonomy, the Kurds regrettably remain geopolitically vulnerable even today. First, through the treaties made by the West, and today also through strategic decisions. And Turkey, again, Turkey comes into the... Turkey plays an extremely significant role for the USA as a NATO partner and for the EU with its refugee policy. Then the EU leadership meets with Erdogan, forming new agreements and so on. But where does that leave the Kurds in all of this? Who even considers the needs of the Kurds?
Turkey is also pursuing an increasingly regressive policy, a regional policy. And so what specific goals is Ankara pursuing then in this complex Syrian-Kurdish context?
As I said earlier, it's also that Erdogan has created a narrative within the state-of-the-art controlled media that Kurds are inherently bad, that they are all, without exception, terrorists. Even though that's not true at all, And through this narrative, they have managed to legitimize these attacks and so on against the Kurds. And then, of course, they utilize their Arab partners, specifically Islamist allies such as Al-Julani and the HTS army, to push further and further into Syria. And just yesterday, I also saw on Turkish television how they are now threatening Iraqi Kurdistan as well. So if Iran does something, then Turkey will step in and They're even negotiating with Iraqi Kurdistan. So this constant destabilization is Turkey's primary narrative, and naturally, they also possess a major enemy in Israel. And if Israel then decides to support the Kurds, that becomes Turkey's absolute biggest nightmare. And over the last 2 days, more and more Israeli politicians are showing solidarity with the Kurds, and this was also in the Israeli Knesset yesterday or the day before. And now Turkey is gripped by fear, isn't it? What's going on with this partnership, this fragile alliance?
So, exactly how do these Turkish ambitions align with these newly formed regional alliances then? I mean, you're saying they are very happy to work with Al-Jolani and HTS? But how does that fit in with the rapprochement with other Arab states and also with Russia? Are there any connections there?
Well, Russia is, how can I put this? It's quite interesting. Turkey, on the other hand, has alliances with Russia, but they're rather limited because Russia also supported the Assad regime back then. But now we're seeing other alliances, and Turkey is moving more towards the south. And I believe the alliance with Arab states, especially Qatar, is much more substantial than with Russia.
We just briefly mentioned it. Many Kurds express sympathies with Israel and also show solidarity with Israel. I think we've been able to follow that quite well on social media over the last 2 weeks. Both peoples understand the fight for security and self-determination. Could you perhaps explain in greater detail where that originates from?
Yes. So I think many Kurds really feel very close to Israel because both peoples understand firsthand from their own experience what it truly means to fight for both security and self-determination. For both of them, this isn't merely a theoretical concept, but indeed a very vital question of survival. Indeed, both Jews and Kurds have endured through generations the harsh realities of persecution, displacement, and undeniably systematic attempts to erase their very identity and heritage, simply because they are Jews or Kurds. That's that's a significant point for this solidarity. And Israel has now developed a security doctrine that is based on self-responsibility. So yes, to defend themselves. That's essentially the core principle of the IDF, isn't it? This is self-defense. It's about recognizing threats early and never ever delegating your own security to others. Others like the USA or even the European powers and similar entities. And this very way of thinking is also found among the Kurds, if they can actually pull it off, you know. Autonomy for them doesn't really mean expansion or dominance over others, but protecting their own society, community, culture, and also other minorities. And we see that in the Rojava self-administration as well, how they also protect other minorities like Yazidis or Druze and so on. Another critical aspect that I perceive to be highly significant is this profound, unwavering bond to the land itself. And for both Jews and Kurds, the land isn't merely an abstract concept. It's an intrinsic part of their very identity. For Jews, the land is the land of the Holy Scripture, and the Jews originate from Judea, specifically Judea and Samaria, which is presently referred to as the West Bank. But they actually come from that specific region, and I believe it's about deep roots, shared history, and certainly a sense of responsibility. And yes, this love for the land is exceptionally crucial, I believe. And yet, this foundation is also built upon the principles of coexistence rather than dominance. That's precisely why in Israel, Druze and also Arabs, Christians, and all minorities live together. And it's exactly this shared understanding of values and respect for human dignity, and also a strong role for women. We mustn't forget that. And yes, that unites the Kurds in Israel, and that's why they sort of see a mirror image in each other, don't they? And that is precisely what this extremist Islamist ideology wishes to eliminate, to wipe away completely.
So there's a stability that comes from shared responsibility, particularly within this context, encompassing both Israel and the Kurds. And India also plays a significant role in this. So could you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, so India is indeed an important partner for Israel in Asia, politically, economically, and also in terms of security, from a security standpoint. Interestingly, Turkish politics, which is ideologically driven, I'm talking about Erdogan's Turkey, not Turkey in general, you understand? And their incredibly close collaboration now with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And I think that really has a very significant destabilizing influence on the entire region. And incidentally, Turkish media also presents India as an adversary, not exclusively Israel and the Kurds. And they also say, for example, about India, things like genocide and colonial states and, well, all those sorts of things like that. Yes, for India too. And especially regarding Kashmir, you know, the way that in Turkish media, the way India is talked about, you really see a lot of similarities to how Turkey speaks about Israel. And Israel has actively, in recent years, in several regions, Israel has initiated significant trade and peace initiatives throughout the entire area. And similar to the Abraham Accords with the UAE, meaning the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco. And I think that a country like Israel, and also Israel, has a great partnership with India, right? And when countries establish such agreements, with the ultimate goal that the well-being and lives of all those involved in the respective regions would significantly improve. How can a nation such as this possibly be viewed as either a colonial power or an oppressive force? Logically, it truly doesn't make any sense, as we frequently observe in mainstream media. I truly believe Israel and India wield a significant influence in stabilizing, that is, further stabilizing the entire region, especially with the UAE as a prominent partner. Yes, and a very recent, if you know, this EU-India free trade agreement, which we had just the day before yesterday, right? And that really strengthens India's position as a trustworthy, pragmatic partner, completely free from any ideological burdens or baggage. And together, I believe India, Israel, and even the Kurds, with their shared values, are striving to defend a pluralistic society and democracy, thereby also promoting stability and demanding it. Precisely. And also to combat terrorism in the process. They are also capable of engaging in intelligence and information exchange activities. You know, they're already doing it, but I think it's becoming more and more necessary. Yes.
German foreign policy could certainly do a little more to truly represent Rojava and the rights of the Kurds. They're not doing that at this very moment. In your opinion, what should happen for the situation of the Kurds to perhaps improve in the near future?
Well, I believe the German government absolutely must prioritize the safety and interests of its own citizens above all else, especially considering those who may not be deeply involved in political matters, and ensure their well-being. It doesn't matter but the interests of its own citizens. And as ordinary German citizens, we definitely don't want to experience any attacks from ISIS or similar groups, do we? Europe has had its difficult experiences, and we certainly don't want that again. At the same time, Germany cannot simply permit everything, and our cultural values should not be continually eroded in the name of an open society or merely welcoming other individuals. We must preserve our distinct cultural identity. This doesn't mean that we just completely abandon our German values and such, you know? Exactly. So, Germany's first and foremost priority should definitely be to protect every single citizen. And in that regard, it is vitally important that Germany ensures these ISIS terrorists do not get away. And the Kurds, who for many, many years have. ISIS terrorists away, who have protected us, they must then be protected by our government. Be protected by our government. And all this whole situation. Yes, these EU funds, which are directly going to Al-Jolani's regime then. Yes, more pressure must be applied to first establish a secure corridor where the Kurds receive the necessary aid. Only then, and certainly not before, should he or the Syrian government receive financial assistance from Europe or anywhere else for the reconstruction of the country. Because those funds can't just be released for them to do whatever they please. No, that's simply not acceptable.
Yes, I agree. That's an important point. Looking ahead, what specific measures would be necessary for Rojava and the Kurdish project to achieve long-term success? What absolutely needs to happen right at this moment?
The situation in Rojava is, of course, extremely serious, and many politicians, whether in the EU, Israel, or even America, have offered words of solidarity and made declarations, but frankly, that simply isn't enough, you know. What is truly needed are concrete actions and secure humanitarian corridors, and not only for the present moment, but for the foreseeable future also. And protection for vital civilian infrastructure, especially for vulnerable populations. Furthermore, targeted sanctions against those who perpetrate attacks on innocent civilians are absolutely essential. And I think first and foremost there needs to be an acknowledgement that this isn't about geopolitical powers, but is instead about safeguarding a population from systematic violence. So this is truly very important. And the Kurds aren't demanding special privileges here really. They're simply seeking a fundamental right to live securely on their own land, free from any fear whatsoever. And for that to happen, it is crucial to maintain a long-term perspective as well. It's simply not enough to merely offer a few words of solidarity and then declare, all right, my duty is fulfilled. No, but what exactly are we doing to ensure that this really comes to fruition? That is the question at hand. Yes, and we absolutely must strengthen the Kurdish, and I must also say the Druze self-administration specifically. Therefore, we must do absolutely everything in our power to ensure that both of these autonomies are indeed strengthened, as they should be. Yes, their autonomy truly requires strong political support and effective protection for the civilian population. And precisely, it also needs the capability to defend against ISIS terrorists and Turkish-backed forces. Actors to defend against such actors. And they need help from the EU, from Israel, yes, structured help. I also spoke yesterday with a Syrian Druze diplomat who regrettably can no longer work and maintain any cooperation or relations with the Syrian government. And he also said, we stand alongside our Jewish brethren and our Kurdish brethren, but we simply cannot accomplish this on our own. And that is precisely why the governments, which possess such immense power, absolutely must step up and do more. Precisely. And I believe that to combat this radical Islamist extremism, which for years has destabilized the entire region and also threatened the whole world, we desperately need new and unmistakable alliances. We need alliances with other strong countries such as India and to build stability. The UAE, also known as the United Arab Emirates, also to establish stability and to safeguard human lives. And then, and only then, can we truly talk about a secure world and global peace. Exactly, and that is. This is also a countermeasure against the influence of Russian, Iranian, and Chinese power.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lass, for offering us these diplomatic and political impressions and insights into the topic at hand. You write for the Jerusalem Post and blog for the Times of Israel, among other places. So if anyone would like to read something from you, we would be happy to provide a link to that. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that notification bell, and do share this conversation on all your social media platforms. For more talks, background and analysis, check out Mena-Watch Weekly. My name is Jasmin Arémi. I'd like to thank Ms. Lass for her time and see you at the next Mena Talk.
Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Thinktank. Besuchen Sie auch unsere Website. Dort finden Sie täglich neue aktuelle Berichte und ausführliche wissenschaftlich fundierte Hintergrundanalysen zur Geschichte und Gegenwart der MENA-Region.